Dr. Sharma, I wanted to ask you about the figure of Ram in the Hindu tradition, because I understand that Ram is a highly looked upon figure who's very emulated. And I was wondering if you would say that there was a contradiction in between the sort of imperative to emulate Ram and the fact that his story includes his abandonment of his wife, whether or not there was a strong contradiction.
Well, I mean, taking your question to its logical conclusion, are Hindus supposed to abandon their wives whenever it is inconvenient for them to live with her, following the example of Ram?
Dandi! Sali! Badmash! I'm not like Rama, who will take a woman who slept in another man's house.
No, but that happens with the Dhobi
that
story.
happens with Dhobi. There is a Dhobi story.
Yeah, you know the Dhobi, the
Right.
The Dhobi says that.
Yeah.
That it's the Dhobi's wife
is
with somebody else, and when
else.
she comes back, he goes, "What do you think? I'm Ram?
I'm like
to
Rama?"
To take somebody back in the house after she's been with
You know the
another
Dhobi
man.
is, right? He's a washerman. Right?
And when
then-
the news of that
laundromat.
hits Ram, Ram says, "I cannot rule if my subjects don't respect me."
Right.
And so you'll have to. Actually, that's when he bans her.
Very important question. Actually, the Hindu tradition, as we were discussing earlier, does not shy away from discussing these issues. In fact, we have whole sessions called Shanka Samadhan, or the resolution of doubts about these major figures. And their life is constantly examined and should be. But my response to your question, very good question, comes in two parts. Which aspect of Ram's life are we supposed to emulate in our relationship with women or wife? And the second connected question then, if he's to be an ideal husband, if he's called an ideal son, ideal brother, ideal ruler, and also to be considered ideal husband, then you have a problem. Now, when I was growing up in India, the aspect of Ram's life which came up as a model in religious discourses for young men was the fact that Ram never had any other woman in his life apart from Sita. That is to say, to put it in sort of modern idiom, Sita had complete control over Ram's sexuality. Even when the king, Ram as king, was going to perform a special sacrifice at which the presence of the queen was absolutely necessary. And he was advised to marry, but he refused. And so a golden image of Sita was cast and placed alongside him to perform all the rituals together. So this idea of being a faithful husband was the image we had of Ram when we were growing up. Now, one reason for this could be that the Ram story comes to us in kind of two versions. In one version, it usually goes up to the return of Ram from Lanka after killing the demon and he rules, his golden rule continues ever after, sort of. The fuller version of the story, of the abandonment and all, is not always narrated in the various versions. And this could partly be because of that. So this is one kind of answer at one level, that this was the person who was held up before us as an ideal, and that he was totally faithful and devoted to his wife, and that is what a husband ideally should be like. The second part of your question raises a major moral and ethical issue. That this Ram abandoned his wife, and that too on the conversation a washerman had with his wife, and that too when she was pregnant. So it borders on the callous and is therefore hard to accept. Now here we have a major issue underlying this whole sequence of events. The issue is this: when public good and personal virtue come in conflict, what should we do? How should we act in a situation in which personal virtue is in conflict with public good? This is a very important point, and without fully absorbing it, we will not be able to really understand the behavior of Ram and why you might say the tradition condones it, kind of, implicitly. Ram wanted to be an ideal king. As an ideal king, Caesar's wife has to be above suspicion. And we should realize here that the idea of the ideal king contains the idea that you should be a role model to the subjects. Now Ram felt at this moment, it's a great moment of crisis for him. Whole plays have been written on it. He loves his wife. On the other hand, by keeping her by his side, he is compromising his role as an ideal king in his judgment, in his own judgment. What does he do now? Ram chooses to prefer public good, of course, as he conceives it, over private virtue. It's a great personal sacrifice he makes to uphold the role of an ideal king. This is not the casual abandonment of a wife because you want to have a good time or want to marry somebody else. This is a deeply deliberated upon step to resolve this conflict in favor of public good. And that is why he is worshipped.
Shri Rama Rama Rameti Rame Rame Manorame Sahasranama Tattulyam Shri Rama Nama Varanane.
Suppose Ram had chosen to be a good husband. would we be discussing him today? I don't know. But the point is that the tradition somehow feels that Ram took a noble decision in preferring public good to private virtue. I don't know how satisfying this conclusion, or this resolution rather, of the conflict will be to others, but the tradition has worshipped him for that. As for his love for his wife Sita, we have a moving description when his brother, who was assigned the job of basically leaving her in the forest, when he returns, and the poet says at this moment that Ram's eyes welled up with tears. He had removed her from his home, but could he remove her from his heart? Again, bringing us back to the point that it was not a decision he took easily.
So would it be fair to say that's characterized as a sacrifice that he made for, that even, does it go that far?
Yeah, well, you see, then when you look at it this way, then you realize why the tradition, while it recognizes that this was not probably, from some point of view, an ideal resolution, still does not hold these points against these figures, like the abandonment of Yashoda, or Yashoda by the Buddha. Now, if the Buddha had decided to stay home, changed his mind on the eve of his great departure, would we have Buddhism? Would we have the order? Would we have the doctrine?